you have an autoimmune disease or something that you are battling when it comes to an autoimmune based nature. So if you feel comfortable in the chat, go ahead and add in the chat exactly what autoimmune disease that you have if you feel comfortable with that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that way we can go ahead and get started and talk a little bit more about everything. All righty. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much for joining in on this call. Autoimmune issues are super close to my heart, mainly because I am someone that actually suffers from an autoimmune disease too as well. So for me, it is something that I've had to battle when it comes to all sorts of issues, when it comes to weight loss, when it comes to fitness, when it comes to having energy. So today we're really going to spend time about how to balance having an autoimmune disease, reaching your goals, as well as balancing the inflammation piece too as well. Because I know for a lot of you, it can be something that's having the energy to keep going can be super challenging. So here's kind of going to be a breakdown of exactly what we're going to go through today. So a little bit about myself for those on the call that don't know me. My name is Karyn Guidry. I actually have a bachelor's degree in exercise physiology as well as nutrition. I went to East Carolina here in North Carolina, where I have a degree in exercise physiology as well as a degree in nutrition. It was around the age of 26 that I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And for me, that was something that was life changing. As a female in my early 20s, dealing with something where fitness was, unfortunately to say this, was my identity, I knew that it was something that was super important that I had to get a handle of. I went to doctors, I did everything and couldn't seem to find the answers that I was looking for. So that's where I really decided to dig a little bit deeper. You know, I know what it's like to go through and want to have a good workout or want to have these goals. And you can't get them because sometimes you're just tired. And for those who don't suffer from an autoimmune disease, the tired that is associated with it is something that is unmatched. You can explain it to people and they don't really understand it. But I explain it best to some of the people that are close to me. It's like, it feels sometimes like an elephant is sitting on your back and you want to keep moving, but then you feel guilty that you need to take a rest. So it's really finding that balance. So write in the chat if exercise is something that is new to you. Is this a new goal or is this something that we've been working on for a little while? For me, it was something that I had been working on for a while. So being diagnosed with Crohn's disease was it changed my whole perspective. I had to slow down a little bit in life too as well. When COVID hit, I went through some hormone issues and I gained about 30 pounds. And that was a really big struggle where it was kind of that light bulb moment where I was like, okay, I've got to fix what's going on with my fitness, fix what's going on with my nutrition to figure out a way to really balance out that inflammation. So I want to break it down into 4 steps to success. So when we're working towards any sort of goal, these are the 4 steps. So number 1 is we want to set a goal. So I want you guys to take a moment and just write down what your goal is. You can add that in the chat if you want to, so that way we can kind of see it. For me, when I had gained all the weight, the biggest goal for me, honestly, was I wanted to feel better and move better. Step 2 is assess our current situation. So where do you fall in the spectrum when it comes to managing your autoimmune disease? So is it something that's fairly new? Is it something that you've been struggling with? Or is it something that, you know, we have a manageable control over? Step 3 in any sort of goal setting strategy is really writing and planning a strategy. Then step 4 is implementing and managing your plan. So these are all the 4 steps that we want to make sure that we're hitting when it comes to hitting these goals. And the reason that we're talking about goal setting is it's something that's super important when we're starting any sort of fitness journey or reassessing where we currently are too as well. So the next step that we're going to do is talk a little bit about metabolism. So for those of you on the call, I'm sure you've heard the word metabolism close to 500 million times. We hear about it all the time. but sometimes it's a little bit hard to know exactly what metabolism is. So let me break it down a little bit further for you. So essentially what metabolism is it's the speed at which the body converts what you eat and drink into energy. So we eat that hamburger or we eat that salad. Our metabolism is how quickly that it can turn into energy that we can use for fuel. So our basal metabolic rate is the amount of energy that your body needs at rest. Then the important process is when we're looking for anything when it comes to weight loss, build muscle, our metabolism is one of the key components. So how do we really raise that? And especially with the autoimmune disease is I always tell people if it's like a math problem, fitness is. So if we have our nutrition correct, if we have our fitness side of things correct, naturally we should lose weight, right? But the biggest thing is when we have these autoimmune diseases, a lot of other things are underneath the hood that we have to look at first. And the thing about the body is the body likes homeostasis. So it likes things to feel normal. So if we have super high rates of inflammation, if we have hormone issues, which is greatly associated with autoimmune issues, these are some of the things that we have to address first in order to get that metabolic rate exactly where we need it to be. So another way that we're really going to focus on doing this, and especially through the autoimmune piece, is really focus on building lean muscle. The higher the muscle mass that we have, the more calories that we're going to burn at rest. So think about it like this. Your metabolism, it's like a fire. If you want it to continue to burn, you have to continue to add logs to it. So my women on the call, I a lot of times I know it's hard. We want to go straight for the cardio aspect or we go straight for the high intensity workouts. You'll kind of see where throughout later in our PowerPoint and everything today is where we'll really talk about managing that, and especially having the autoimmune disease where sometimes recovery is just as important and just as beneficial as killing yourself in the gym. And for those of you who do suffer with an autoimmune disease, this is going to be one of those things that is probably one of the most important pieces. It's not always murdering yourself too as well. So when we're goal setting and we have our goal, the biggest thing is it's going to take time. You know, if our goal is weight loss, if our goal is to build muscle, there is a little bit of time it takes to get there, right? Unfortunately, when I gained 30 pounds, it didn't happen in a day. It happened over time. So as much as I'm a crazy person and want things to happen yesterday, like I'm a fan of the Amazon Prime, I want it yesterday. The whole have to wait a week thing doesn't really work for me. So I get it. We want instantaneous results, but I want to break down this exponential curve for you. So think about your fitness goals like this. If our goal is, we'll use it to build 5 pounds of lean muscle. If our goal is to lose 30 pounds, whatever that may be, the biggest component is that first initial 3 months. That's when we call that breaking ground. So that in any sort of fitness program is going to be about building that solid core foundation. We want to make sure that we have the correct exercises, the correct movement patterns. So if there's any injuries that we're working on, and especially in the case with all of you guys on the call, this is where we're really building that foundation. So it's not to say that you can't ever do high intensity workouts, but maybe if we're just starting our journey when it comes to our autoimmune issue, we don't want to start that right away. We want to build upon it and layer upon it. So the biggest thing that I want to explain is you need to give yourself grace that it might not always happen where we're going to 5 days of Orange Theory. It might just be 1 day to start off with if that's what you enjoy doing. The biggest piece that I find with most every client that I've ever worked with is we go into the gym and we do the exact same thing every single time because we don't know how to make those changes. Especially for all of you guys on this call, the strength training component, that's going to be our solid core foundation. That's building that lean muscle, that's building that metabolism, and it's help creating that foundation. That's where we get into that 3 to 6 months. So our 3 to 6 months, that's what I call our renting stage. So when you're new to a fitness journey, that's where we're not quite there yet, but we're starting to see those changes. So 3 to 6 months, that's the biggest piece is we want to get to that 6 months. The last thing we want to do is go right back to where we started from and kind of figure out that hamster wheel. So I use my mom as an example. I know she probably listens to this thing and gets angry at me about using her as an example for all my fitness stuff. But the biggest thing is the last thing we want to do is go right back to where we started because we did the same thing. So I find that people are the most successful when they get to that point where they're owning their goals. So they know exactly what they're doing in the gym. They've built that solid core foundation, and we're not diving into the deep end head first. So we want to make sure that we have the correct movement patterns, that we've built layer upon layer to get to that goal. Okay. So it doesn't take 3 days, but it might not take a year. But the biggest piece and the biggest takeaway from this is we want to make sure that we're slowly building that foundation and we're slowly layering upon it. Because especially when fatigue sets in or when there's high inflammation markers and things like that, that's where we have to really be careful and make sure that we're managing those things too as well. So in your packet, you got a SWOT analysis. So I want you to take a second, close your eyes, whatever you need to do to find that space where you can think is, I want you to think about what are your barriers to fitness right now when it comes to your health or when it comes to your outside life. So if you feel comfortable sharing it in the chat, go ahead. What is something that's getting in the way of you and reaching these goals? Is it something like time? Is it financial? Is it family support, knowledge, accountability, intensity? I will make sure that I re-email everything out, but just write it out on a sheet of paper if you want to. What is your number? Or write it in the chat. What is the one thing that's getting in the way of your goals? I know for me, struggling with the autoimmune issue and my Crohn's disease coming out of it was the biggest piece was the energy levels associated with it. I found that if I killed myself in the gym, then 3 days later, I didn't have the energy to go back to the gym. So when we're kind of setting our goals, we want to make sure that we're going in and we're kind of hitting these barriers and we're planning for success. So, for example, if it's something like time, we want to make sure that the workouts fit it within your lifestyle. It doesn't mean that you have to spend hours upon hours working out in the gym. If you're a mom or you have a really big job or something coming up, sometimes time is a factor. Strength and motivation is the biggest piece for a lot of people. It is sometimes the same thing for myself, especially when you're tired, right? So these are some of the things that we want to make sure going into our plan that we set up to make sure that we're successful. It's like to plan for success, we have to make sure we know what our failures are so we don't do them, right? So go through. What I want you to do is we're going to spend the next 2 minutes. If you don't have the packet, go ahead and make a square box. But what I want you to do is I want you to write down what are the strengths right now that you have as far as getting to your goals. So is it something like you have a support system, you have a membership of a gym, you actually enjoy working out? Busy mom trying to find time. I don't have kids yet, but my husband's kind of like one, so I can understand that a little bit. The next step that I want you to do, and you can also throw this in the chat, is what are some of the weaknesses right now that you suffer with when it comes to reaching these goals? And they can be autoimmune and health related. For a lot of people, that might be energy. Okay. So we now have some time. That's great. So the next thing I want you to do is write down where are our areas of opportunity. So maybe we are super busy, but we probably could make at least 2 times a week, 30 minutes work. We could work out at home. What are some things, I think a lot of times society is like, you have to go to the gym, you have to do this, you have to work out every single day of the week. But there are so many area opportunities where it doesn't have to be a cookie cutter thing to get to your goal. It can also be, customized to what fits within your lifestyle. And the last thing is threats. So what is some of the things that's getting in the way of your goals? So for me, coming out of the autoimmune issues, for me, the threats were Honestly, the energy, having enough energy to make sure that I could keep going throughout a workout and work the next day. So now that we've created our goals, I really want to talk about when it comes to autoimmune issues, cardio versus strength. So there's two different components when it comes to reaching our fitness goals. The cardio component, number one. Then the strength. It's finding that balance and especially building that balance when it comes to inflammation. So for those with autoimmune disease, inflammation markers can be super, super high. So what we want to do is we want to manage that. The biggest thing too is exercise does create inflammation. Again, I said earlier that we want to make sure that the body likes homeostasis. So we want to keep it there. So that's where, we have to make sure if we're having super high inflammation markers that maybe that's when our workouts change. So for example, something that I did throughout my journey is I wanted to make sure that I had ways to judge and track this. So I use something called a Whoop. You can see it right here. It's on my hand. So I love this because it gave me an idea of exactly what my body was going through on a day by day basis. The Whoop is a great component that will help when it comes to what days I did strength training, what days I did cardio, and what days that I did just a basic recovery day or took a rest day. The cool thing about the Whoop is basically it'll track your HRV. It'll show based on your sleep based on your breathing, based on your blood oxygen level, what your body, your strain is throughout the day. So how much energy you expended. It'll take into account your sleep, and then the next day it'll take into the account recovery. It does it on a scale system called strain, but it also is kind of on a color system. So the biggest thing that I used it for was on days that I had super high inflammation markers, those are days that I took rest days. It also helped me in the sense of I made sure that I was taking those rest days. And for me, it was a lot of the mental capacity of it, of like, okay, it's okay for you to take a rest. So that's where we're going to get into the piece of the strength training component when it comes to fitness. So why should you do strength training? One, decrease body fat, gain strength, boost metabolism and calorie burn, and decreases your chance of osteoporosis and reduce your risk of heart disease. So the foundation, I get this question all the time. How many days a week should you strength train? So I always tell people 2 to 3 days is what you want to at least do the minimum for strength training. So how do we exactly do that strength training, especially when it comes to the autoimmune component? So where we start off with is we want to start off with, again, that foundation. So we're doing that warm up for 10 minutes, getting that blood flow to the body. And this is how we break down a workout step-by-step component. So starting with the lighter weights, gradually increasing weights, resting for 60 seconds in between sets, limit your workout to about 45 minutes, gently stretch your muscles after your workout, and have a rest day in between your workouts. So when I'm breaking down a strength training program for people starting off, what I typically like to do is have a full body workout. Here's why. If you train shoulders every single week, one time a week, and all you train is twice a week, it may be a whole nother 7-10 days before you ever see shoulders again. We also want to make sure that we're hitting those larger muscle groups too as well. When we hit those larger muscle groups, essentially what we're doing is we're burning more calories during our workout too as well. The cool thing about this strength training is not only are we burning calories while we're working out, but we're also going to continue to burn them throughout the day. Kind of on the second note to that, the cool thing about the strength training is, yes, we are tearing our muscles, which does cause inflammation, but it's not going to be quite as high impact as hitting those high heart rate zones. And that's what we're going to talk about next when it comes to the cardio piece too as well. So when we're breaking down a strength training program and you're getting started, it can be a little bit intimidating about where to go and what to do. So there's 5 foundational movements. We have our squats, our lunge, our push, our pull, our rotation, and our hinge. And there's so many different ways this can be broken down. So with our squat, all of these can translate into everyday life. So your squat is very similar to getting in and out of a chair. Your lunge, think of a step up, think of a walking lunge. There's so many ways to progress and regress the exercise without just adding more weight to a machine too as well. We have our push, so we could use a machine, we could use a push-up. There's so many different, we could use a TRX band for a push-up. We have our pull, so single arm row, double arm row. We have our machine too that we can utilize. Rotation, think of a core exercise. And lastly, that is our hinge. So my favorite go-to is going to be our straight leg deadlift on that one. So this is the component that's going to be super important for all of you with the autoimmune issues, is going to be the cardio. So we have 5 different heart rate zones, and this is what's going to come really important is, are we training in those heart rate zones? And here is how that connects to inflammation and autoimmune disease. So what is heart rate zone training? So I'm sure if you have an Apple Watch, if you have something that tracks it, you've seen what your heart rate is. You hear of Orange Theory, who has your heart rate zones, all of that. And a lot of times what some of these fitness influencers or fitness people really look at is, how can we get you in the highest heart rate zone? So I want to tell you, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news or good news, whichever way you want to look at it, is we want you training in the lower heart rate zones. And here's why. So let's talk first about what heart rate zone training is. So basically what it is it's taking the reading of your beats per minute, usually through some sort of heart rate strap or things of that nature. And we want to make sure that the cardiovascular system is working in different levels. So we have our zone 1 through our zone 5. The benefit of it is it's going to hit our different target zones. So there's ways to train in a fat burning zone versus a power zone. And it's going to push your cardio system enough to generate adaptation. So you're going to continue to get better. So when it comes to an autoimmune disease, I talked about the foundation. We don't want to start off in a zone 5 on your first day, because what we're doing is it's super taxing on the body. So think zone 5 is something like sprints, or you're doing burpees and sprints. You're doing something that's super high intensity. The great thing too, and this is going to be the most important component, is it helps avoid overtraining too as well. And it helps you be a little bit more specific with your training too. So with that said, this is how to set up your heart rate zones. So on your watch, say you have an Apple Watch, a Garmin, anything like that, it'll automatically, once you put your age in, go ahead and do that for you. So those are great measures to measure your heart rate zone. You can get a heart rate strap. I use my Whoop for it, and then I have a Garmin I like to use for my heart rate zones training. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to take 220 minus your age. Then in order to find our different heart rate zones, what we're going to do is we take percentages of them. So let's talk about what zone 1 is, so you know exactly how it feels. So zone 1, think, is like a casual walk in the park. You should be able to have a conversation all day long about anything. This is you strolling with like your baby, strolling with your mom and dad, your elderly parent or grandparent can walk with you. So, but it's a key component when it comes to improving aerobic fitness. So this zone 1 is essential for recovery. So if you're taking notes, I would say schedule 1 zone 1 cardio session a week, because we're working on recovery. It could last about 30 to 60 minutes, and that's about the time frame that you want to keep this zone in. Zone 2, that's where our aerobic development comes in. So this is the zone I love. This is the zone I stay in. I thrive in zone 2. It improves fat metabolism. So if your goal is to lose fat, zone 2 is where we want to be at. Your zones, as your body adapts over time, it will get better. So for example, if your heart rate zones are higher, initially, as you do it more, your heart rates will get better too, and your zones will change a little bit based on that too as well. So that's where, if you're using a watch or using anything to do that, you want to make sure that you're going in and adjusting your weight, because it does play a role into that too as well. So it helps increase blood volume, mitochondrial mass, capillary density, and aerobic enzymes. But most important word of that, fat metabolism, right? So think about this. You want to stay in that zone about 30 plus minutes. So if we're working out 3 days a week, we're going to have 1 day recovery, and we're going to have at least 1 day of a zone 2. if you're very new to fitness and this is something that you are just starting out, I would say start off with a zone 1 and then do 2 zone 2 days. Okay. Then we have our zone 3, and that's our aerobic capacity. So our benefits are very similar to zone 2. So if you're starting off new into walking, and when I say these zones, you can do any form of cardio. So whether it's riding the bike, whether it's sometimes walking, hiking, running, stairmaster, elliptical, all of those can be based off of your zone rate when it comes to cardio. And basically what that is doing is this is where you're getting your maximum output of fat and oxidative metabolism. But it's something that we want to make sure when we're training in it that we're kind of in that middle zone. When we're in that renting stage, that's where we're going to start our zone 3s, where our body's adapted a little bit to as well. Then our zone 4, this is our endurance. So this helps create muscular endurance and should only be about 10% of training. And then lastly, so we'll go back to zone 4 real quick. Zone 4, think about that as like you're not full out sprint or doing burpees and sprinting. Like, say if we're running at a pretty brisk pace. You should be able to have a conversation, but it's one of those conversations where I'm running with a friend and I'm like, okay, I can't talk anymore. Like, we're just going. And then zone 5 is it does build our metabolism. It is 90% of our max heart rate zone. So the best explanation of a zone 5 is going to be something similar to taking one of those high intensity classes, like an F45 or a Orange Theory, or a lot of those higher intensity classes that are out there. To kind of explain a little bit about those types of classes and why I associated them with zones and cardio. The reason being is this type of weight training that you're doing is you're hitting a higher heart rate, or you're hitting a higher heart rate zone, but you're hitting higher rep ranges, which is going into more of a cardio base and your endurance capacity, versus lifting into a 10 to 12 rep range is going to be more for building lean muscle. And that aspect of things. So that's why there's the difference. And I associate those types of high intensity classes a little bit more with the zone 5. So zone 5 isn't bad. But we want to make sure that we've built that foundation, we've built that running stage, and then we're hitting that zone 5. So say, for example, you've been working out for a little while. How I would break down your week if you're training 4 to 5 days is I would break it down by having at least 1 zone 1, 2 zone 2s, 1 zone 3, and 1 zone 4 or 5. So for example, we're only doing a zone 4 or zone 5 one day a week if we have hit that range where we've built past that renting and we're in that owning stage. Okay. Other than that, let's stay in those zone 1, zone 2. Reason being is it's going to help keep a lower rate of inflammation. It's going to be easier on your joints. And it's also in that fat burning zone too as well. What I find a lot with especially women or even men who have stressful lives when it comes to work, children, all of that, they're already living life essentially in a zone 5. They're in that heightened immune system state. They're in that heightened inflammation state. So we want to make sure that our exercise isn't exacerbating that. Instead, it's also, we're training in those lower heart rate zones too as well. So sometimes that recovery aspect is a good component. So on the screen, you will see an example of exactly how to build a sample cardio workout too as well. This is our warm up. So the biggest thing when we're starting any sort of cardio is going to be the warm up. So this breaks it down into 10 minutes. So I would suggest doing this warm up before every lift and every cardio session. Here's why. When we do this, we're going through every stage. We're priming our body for activity. The cool thing is too, this is getting us where we're burning off excess carbs, going into more of a fat burning zone. So when you're on the fitness floor or you're on the cardio deck or you're outside running, your body is going to be better officially burning your fat stores rather than burning carbohydrates that you ate throughout the day. So that's the importance of that 10-minute warm up that you'll see on the screen. Then I would say rest for 2 to 3 minutes after, then go straight into your strength training program or your cardio program after that. So that way your body is basically better efficient for the exercises that you're doing, and you're going to burn more calories and burn more fat in the long run. So we're going to kind of change tones here. And I get this question a lot, like, what is the best type of exercise? So there's no great answer for that. I always tell people these are kind of the 5 components that you want to base what is fun and what is the best type of exercise. Everyone's starting at a different point. So 1, does it make you feel good? If you're killing yourself in the gym and then you're tired for 3 days because of your fatigue and things like that, maybe we need to reassess what we're doing. We're throwing in a Pilates day, we're throwing in a yoga day. There's so many different ways. So does it actually make you feel good? And is it something that's semi-enjoyable? So that way you stick with it long term. Number 2 is it's not a punishment. So the biggest thing that I have to tell people is, yes, sometimes I don't want to work out myself either, but we shouldn't be punishing ourselves for what we ate or what we did throughout the week. And that shouldn't be associated with our fitness. Is it enjoyable? Are you actually having fun? I get it. I don't enjoy burpees. There's certain things that are not enjoyable to me, but I do know sometimes going to group fitness classes are super fun. I'm around other people, so that's enjoyable. It has nothing to do with your appearance. As vain as I may be, sometimes setting goals that are not associated with the number on the scale will get you that number on the scale that you want a lot quicker. So I challenge you to come up with a goal that's not based on body fat percentage and not based on the number on the scale. So instead, think of a goal like, okay, my goal is I went from working out no days a week to working out 2 days a week consistently for this amount of time. That's an amazing goal. My goal is to sleep better in the evening and have 7 hours of sleep. So think of some goals that are outside of the weight and body fat number, and you'll enjoy it, but then those numbers will be a byproduct of it too as well. And then lastly is it's not used to earn food. So that's going to be a big component. So you don't have to kill yourself in the gym to go work out or to go eat a lot. Sometimes your body needs that fuel or that energy source to be able to perform too as well. So we'll go into the rest days, because a lot of times, I know for me, someone who loved working out, taking rest days were challenging. On the other end of the spectrum, for individuals who are new to working out and don't necessarily love the working out component of everything, sometimes rest days turn into rest weeks. So how can we balance all of that out? And for those of you with fatigue and things of that nature, rest days are going to be super important, because not only do they help with aesthetics, muscle growth, and performance, but it's going to help long-term with you staying with the program too as well. So we're going to talk about each of these individually. First, aesthetics, muscle growth, and then as well as performance too. So aesthetically, why is a rest day important? So exercise is a stressor on the body, and it generates a stress response. This stress response directly leads into the inflammation. So inflammation is going to inhibit weight loss. Sometimes it's going to make you groggy. In many cases, it's going to exacerbate a lot of those autoimmune issues that you do have. So whether it's fatigue, maybe for me it was bloating, any of that sort of thing, it will sometimes cause that. So that's where it's important to throw in those rest days too as well. Hormonally, the adrenals respond with a fight or flight response after exercise, as well as a sustained cortisol response. So when you work out, you raise your cortisol levels. If you have a busy life and your job, your kids, your husband, your wife, whoever it may be, you have those stressors on the outside of your life, we don't want that cortisol level that's already here to go here. So the important thing about the rest and recovery days is if we already have high cortisol, we're increasing the workout, which is going to cause more cortisol. We want to make sure that rest day is bringing it back down. So that way, when we work out, we're not just keeping and getting higher and higher with those cortisol levels. Chronically elevated cortisol levels will induce more aldosterone production, meaning you'll retain more body water and things like that. For those of you on this call who suffer from that as one of the byproducts of your autoimmune disease, we don't want to increase that too as well. So that's where the recovery days are super important too. My biggest piece of advice, I know for me, I used to get swollen joints and I would get puffy in the face. I always suggest throwing in something like dandelion root the next day is super helpful. It is going to be a natural way to kind of rid that body of water. It also helps with liver detoxification. And then making sure that we're getting enough water in too as well. And we're getting enough salt in, which might be the opposite of what you think. Salt's going to help get us the water out of our body too. And we don't want to feel puffy or bloated. And then essentially it allows your body to get out of a stress phase, and it allows your body to hormonally balance too as well. So on the other end, where it helps with muscle growth, so rest days, exercise essentially breaks down your muscle. When you're consistently breaking down your muscle, you want to make sure that you're giving them time to repair. What will happen? Think we break down the muscle fiber. In order to build more lean muscle to burn more calories, we need to give it ample amount of time to regenerate and build itself back up. The lack of rest is basically digging yourself in a hole. So think something that's broken and we keep cracking it. We keep cracking it. So we want to make sure that we have that rest in order to make sure that we can perform the next day. Then the last component is going to be performance. So if your goal is performance related, or you want to be able to lift heavier or move better in the gym, again, when we train, we stress our bodies. We want our body to adapt. So during our rest and recovery, our body's adapting, and then it's changing. So to this whole point of everything is, so when we're recovering, you won't always need the same amount of recovery on your first week of working out versus your first year of working out. So that's where we go from that foundational phase until the owning our goals. Our body's consistently changing and adapting. So where we talked about our zones, maybe starting off with a zone 1 and zone 2 versus incorporating the zone 5. As you consistently do it, your body's changing and adapting over time. So you are going to see those results where, 2 years ago, I was going through all this myself. I could only lift 3 days a week. I needed to make sure that I was getting ample amount of recovery. And I actually saw more progress that way, to where I slowly increased it to where now I'm crazy. I love running. I can run 13 miles and work out the next day, and my body doesn't have the stress response that it did when I first started this too as well. So that's where I really encourage you to have that patience, because it does take time, and it does take time for your body to change and adapt too as well. And you'll also find that you're able to push yourself harder. So where day 1, you might not be able to throw that high intensity cardio day in, but day 50, you might be able to, because we've changed and we've done it in a systematic approach to our goals too as well. So building the perfect plan. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a second, and I want you to commit to what days that you're working out. So if you're starting off with 2 days or 3 days, and then I want you to go and I want you to fill in what days that you're doing your cardio in your zones. So like we talked about before, if you're doing 2 or 3 days of strength training, for most people starting on this call, your workouts can be an hour. It's okay. Your workouts can be an hour and a half. I typically keep, if I do 4 days a week of training, I'll do an upper body, a lower body, an upper body, a lower body day. And then I'll incorporate my cardio after, where I'm out of the gym in an hour and 10 minutes. If we're doing 3 days a week, we can split it up in a few different ways. We can have an upper body day, a lower body day, and a full body day, or we could do 3 full body days too as well. I tend to stay away from the old school bodybuilding split now of the shoulders versus legs, all of that. I tend to find that most people through the 12 years of my training, even men, because we have one on this call, is we tend to have the most results when we actually do split muscle groups when it comes to upper lower splits. As crazy as that sounds, and keeping the exercises to just about 5 exercises in the gym. More is not always better. So that kind of wraps up today. I hope you guys got a great introduction into how autoimmune disease and starting, and really the aspect of how to add cardio and strength training into what you're currently doing. So what I'll do is, if you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and stay on, type them in the chat box, and I will answer them too as well for you guys. I will upload all of this information onto YouTube. And if you aren't joined into my Facebook group or Instagram, go ahead and join that. I try to give tips, tricks, and recipes, all that fun stuff on there. But if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them on the chat. I'll be on here for the next 3 to 5 minutes, depending on that, and try to answer all your questions. Awesome. Thank you for tuning in, Becca or Becky. Awesome. You have a wonderful day. Awesome. Thank you, Lewis. You guys have a wonderful evening, and I will have all that uploaded. Becky, I will send that to you. My apologies. I might not have had the email correct to send it out, but I'll get that sent over to you here in just a second. You guys have a wonderful day, and get started on that program. I'll see you later.